most amazing, most difficult job we will ever have. But we can always learn. And that's what we want to do, is create opportunities for us to learn as a community, as parents, as a school community. We'll have other subjects and opportunities in the coming weeks. Next week we're going to be talking about survey results and the reaccreditation. In the next few weeks in April, I believe, we'll be doing something, guidance counselors and common developmental characteristics that sometimes as parents you wish your children would not go through, but they do. And so we'll be sharing more on that. But today, thrilled to have Randi Mackintosh. Randi's a parent, has two girls here, Carlin and Ellie, and I was thrilled when she reached out and just bounced off an idea of what do you think this sounds like. And myself having a counseling degree, it was great to go back and forth, and especially with the pressures of trying to be the best parent that we can appear to be with social media. In all the pressures that are on us, on our kids, it continues to get more difficult. So licensed professional psychologist, lots of experience. I'm just going to turn it over to Randi. So thank you for being here.
Thank you guys for being here. There's a lot going on campus this week, so any opportunity I have to get people here for something else, not directly related to your kids performing in something, is awesome. I really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about resilient parenting. I know a lot of you here, some of you are new faces, but just raise your hand if you have elementary age kids, like preschool, elementary. Okay. What about middle school? A couple middle school and high school? Okay, great. So a bulk of this is geared toward more the lower age, which is what we had initially talked about maybe being most relevant and the parents who might come, but I think all of this is applicable to kids of any ages. So basically, resilient parenting is the idea that we can adapt. We can adapt really quickly. And what we're going to talk about are some really practical strategies that you guys hopefully take home today and implement in your lives, right? So this is not a theoretical discussion. This is really hands-on, very tangible. I hope you all leave with some really practical ideas that you can start today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a clinical psychologist. I initially started working out at FSU's College Counseling Center. About 11 or 12 years ago, I did my residency and my postdoc there. I loved working with college students for a lot of reasons. I was in my probably late 20s at that point, and I related so much to the things that they were going through. We were talking about academic stressors, identity development, family dynamics, choosing a career. These were things that I had recently gone through or was going through at the time. This was very relatable. And then fast forward a couple years, I had my oldest daughter when I was in my early 30s. I could not relate to these college students anymore. They had all this freedom I didn't have. They were talking about things. I knew most of the social media apps. I was really humbled one time when I think I was 31 and one of my clients asked me if I knew what Tinder was. I was like, yes, I'm aware. I'm not, 59 years old, never been on this planet before. I'm aware of what these are. I work with college students. And what I realized was it just wasn't relating as much to me and what I was going through in my life. So I left actually to start a private practice for a little bit more flexibility when my oldest daughter was born. And I started working with a lot of adults kind of all age groups and still a lot of college students. But what I noticed was that the people that I was relating to the most were parents of young children. And I think what I noticed really resonated was the busyness of their schedule, the shuffling of priorities, the loss of identity that a lot of them were going through, having had to sacrifice so much to be there for their kids and show up in a lot of ways. So that was what became my interest and my focus. So a lot of the work that I do with my clients, has to do with things like anxiety or depression. That's what initially brings them in. But it was really interesting how much parenting, the topic of parenting, would come up. It was almost like they felt like they couldn't bring it up because they knew it was supposed to be stressful and it's just part of the gig we all signed up for. But through those discussions and me bringing in some of what I have learned through positive psychology, resilience building, they found that they had things to do in those moments of tough parenting that helped make them a little bit easier. So that was the hope behind this conversation today, is just to bring that to you all, to give you some of those ideas, to validate a lot of the emotions you're probably feeling, and hopefully just continue this conversation that you are hearing today with your groups and your support groups outside of here. One thing I've noticed that's really unique about this generation of parenting is we have so much at our disposal in terms of how to parent. Probably more than we want, more than we could ever consume. I'm thinking about podcasts, articles, books, all these things, social media posts that talk about how to raise a successful kid, how to raise a resilient kid, how to raise an emotionally intelligent kid. These are all wonderful. But the piece that's missing, I think, is focusing on the resilience of parents. And all that other stuff does is kind of increase the pressure on us to make sure we're getting it right. And so while I think all that is wonderful information, this piece that we're going to cover today, I hope gives you the information you need to focus on your own resilience, and as a result, you will raise resilient kids. They're going to see it modeled for you. So why is resilience so important? Resilience means the ability to bounce back after challenges or difficulties. So I want to stress that this doesn't mean that you bounce back immediately. That's not realistic. It's not what generally happens. A lot of us experience some pretty significant setbacks, significant losses in our lives. These things take time, right? So when I say resilience and bouncing back, I want you to understand it's not the goal to immediately bounce back and feel better all of a sudden, right? Resilience as a whole can serve as a buffer against things like anxiety and depression. So we're all born with some predisposition in our brain chemistry to develop things like anxiety, depression, other mental health disorders. But that part we can't really control, right? That's in our brain chemistry or DNA. The part we can control that serves as a buffer is building resilience. Nobody's born with resilience. We have to cultivate that. Our kids have to cultivate that and learn that. And that will truly serve as a buffer. It will lessen the impact of those other issues when they arise in our lives if we've got this solid resilience in place. The other thing that we know just through our research, I didn't cite it all, but there's a lot of research out there that's talking about resilience in terms of increasing well-being, just general well-being, flexibility in terms of our ability to adapt, think outside the box, be flexible in terms of problem solving, and actual longevity. There are studies that show that people who are resilient are living longer, primarily because they have more problem-solving abilities, they have optimism, they have good support networks in place. All these things we know lead to longevity. I meant to say this, if you guys have questions at any point, please jump in, because I can't read the room. If you guys are unclear about something, please just holler out and I'll take time for questions. The other thing that I really love about resilience is that it teaches us to look at failure as an opportunity for feedback. And this is really critical. A lot of the college students that I would see in my practice were the top of the top. They were incredibly bright. They were in all the top classes. They were president of their student organization. They had lots of friends, and they were paralyzed with anxiety about failing. And it broke my heart because I could see how much effort they were putting into this experience to get all these things that they cared about, or they thought they cared about, they were taught that they should care about, and then them feeling totally anxious all the time about failing in any one of those areas, and they weren't enjoying their college experience. They were in my office in tears a lot of the times because they didn't think this is what it was going to feel like. So the idea that we can see failure as opportunities for feedback is pretty instrumental for us, but then also to pass on to our kids. I love this because it means we can mess up. There's a freedom in that. There's a value in that. If our kids see us mess up, it can be as simple as, I burned dinner. This happens a lot in my house. I burned dinner. I guess we're having sandwiches, all right? And so it's very minor. You're not having a conversation about failure. But they see it. They know that it's okay. They see grown-ups messing up. I can remember moments when my parents did something. My mom would get lost all the time. She has ADHD. She would get lost all the time. And she'd say, taking the scenic route. And that's what I thought of it as. Just a little bit, go on a detour. And that was her really demonstrating to me, I don't need to get flustered in this moment. This is going to be okay. And that stuck with me. The other thing that, my mom was a mental health therapist, so maybe none of this is a surprise. She's a little bit ahead of her time. But the other thing she would also say related to failure that really stuck with me, we would try new things, we'd try new activities, we would start a new school year, and we'd be going out the door, and she'd say, make lots of mistakes, have fun. And it was just this freedom that I don't think I realized at the time that she expected that. She expected there to be mistakes. She expected there to be moments of struggle, and I would go and talk to her about that, right? She wasn't setting me up to believe that everything was going to go smoothly. So if that's one little thing you can add to your interactions with your kids, it's an easy one, and it kind of gives them the freedom to relax and not have to feel like everything goes perfectly well the first time. All right, so what do we know about resilient parents? It's kind of this monkey see, monkey do mentality. So they're more likely to model effective coping skills for their kids. And that's really why you guys are here, right? We want to instill this resilience in you so that you are able to model this for the people in your life, your partners, your significant others, your kids. We're going to talk specifically about coping skills and what you might be able to take away from that today. We show greater patience and flexibility in times of stress. Are you all familiar with the term frustration tolerance? Frustration tolerance. Okay, so this is very self-explanatory, but the ability to tolerate frustration. So we can be anywhere on a continuum from really low to really high. And I'll give you a good example. We just finished spring break, right? So Monday morning of spring break, we were getting ready to travel, bags were packed, super excited. I had a really high frustration tolerance at that moment, right? I could tolerate a lot. I was kind of really excited about the week. You know, then up to Sunday night at bedtime, right? We've been traveling all week, we hadn't gotten enough sleep, we were out of our routine. I had a very low frustration tolerance, right? My ability to handle the pushback, the complaining, the whining was almost like nothing. So just thinking about frustration tolerance in that regard, the goal of resilience is to increase that resilience, is to increase the frustration tolerance so that all those little things we can handle much more easily, and then we'll be able to save the reactions for the things that maybe need more of our attention. And a lot of this has to do with, again, how much sleep we're getting, how much self-care we're doing. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Again, we're going to teach our kids that failure is not only okay, but inevitable. And then we're going to enjoy our kids more. If you think about a resilient parent, they're getting more out of those interactions, they're taking care of themselves, they're not building these resentments that come so quickly and easily when we're not making time for ourselves. So there's a better balance there. And with balance, we tend to enjoy the role of parenting more. So this I was kind of curious just to get some input from you guys. Is parenting what you expected? What are your top parenting stressors? I would love to hear from a few of you. Have a minute to think about it. I'll throw out one that I definitely felt very early on. When my oldest was born, she was maybe 2 weeks old, and my husband left to go to the grocery store. And I was incredibly jealous that he was going to the grocery store. I didn't want to go to the grocery store, but I was jealous that he could. And then I realized in that moment, anything that he or I wanted to do from that point on was going to require a lot of planning. And it just is that freedom that for me, you know, before having kids, I could go at any time of day for however long I wanted, and that just wasn't the case. So, you know, even if you have a really great support network in place and family here and all these things, you still have to plan all that out. You just can't up and go generally. And that to me was a huge, and continues to be one of the most stressful parts of parenting. But what are some others? Noise. Boys or noise? I've written some down. I had not thought of that one, but yes, 100%. Yes, you don't control that necessarily. It's in your environment at all times. Yeah, that's a great one. What else?
Repetitive requests that get you to a point where they don't listen, they don't listen, they don't listen, and then it takes you reaching that level to get them to do it, and then you feel guilty before reaching that level.
Yes, good one. That's a great one. Yeah.
I think dealing with like different age kids in the mornings, like trying to get out the door, and you have like a 4-year-old who's on her wavelength and an 11-year-old on her, you know, the dealing with the morning routine with different
Absolutely.
ages.
I was thinking about the morning rush. That was one thing I had written down because my age kids, you know, they need a lot of direction still. They can get themselves stressed, but it's still, they get distracted easily. But then I'm thinking about some of these older kids who you're maybe dragging out of bed. There's no time, like they don't have time. I don't know, everybody's mornings look different, but generally I think it is a rush for a lot of people. We're trying to get things together, projects, snacks, all that stuff. So morning rush is a huge one. What else? Yeah.
I think working people could relate to this. You get home from school and work and they're starving and they're crying because they're starving and you're cooking dinner and you're, you know, like trying to do all the things, washing lunch boxes.
Yep.
Like the afternoon pre-dinner
Chaos.
stress.
Yes, for sure. I think I wrote in this. This is the other one I was going to share. Like the 5-minute transition between the car and the house. I don't know what is happening. Everyone's hot, everyone's hungry, there's bags everywhere, there's papers everywhere. I'm not mastered that yet. Yes, I look in the back seat and like, it was a 5-minute drive home from school, what just happened? Yes, for sure. Those transition times, right, the morning, the afternoon, the evening transitions are really kind of prime for stress. Any others? Yeah.
I think too, with multiple children, when there's multiple needs at the same time, and trying to prioritize that.
Yep.
And make sure everyone knows that like, mom can't do all of it.
Yeah, you can't win.
Yeah.
Somebody's getting
Someone's gonna
neglected
lose,
in that
and then
moment,
you
for
will.
sure. And you ultimately are losing because you've got to attend to all these people before you can attend to yourself. Yeah, good one. Any others? Yeah.
I think just the feeling of guilt, as much as I do, is something I did not expect, whether it be with my first kid, taking time for myself. I felt guilty for doing that, even though I shouldn't. And now with the second one, trying to manage both, like you said, different ages, is an overwhelming feeling of guilt constantly. Like I'm not doing enough for each kid, which is not what I expected.
For sure. We're going to talk about guilt specifically in a little bit. I'm glad we brought that one up. Others?
I think the daily life stuff, for sure. I mean, I feel like that every single day. But also when I just lay down at night and the thoughts of the little conversations that you have and was it exactly the right thing to say? And, you know, I think the worry, guilt, same type of thing, but also are we getting it right?
Right.
You know, and like, I think she's a good kid,
Yeah.
but I don't really know.
Oh, trust me, in my profession, I'm like all the ways I'm screwing my kids up.
Yeah.
Like, I see what happens down the road, and I'm like, that's it, it's done, we're done. So yeah, I think about, you know, obvious ones like financial, right? I mean, it's expensive to have kids. We have to invest a lot in our kids. You know, juggling, managing conflict between kids, you know, bullying experiences, all these things. Co-parenting, I think, can get tricky. If you have a different style of parenting than your partner, if you don't have a large support network of family in town or other people to rely on, all those things can be pretty significant stressors. Yeah, so another thing, we talked about nighttime routines and things like that. I think about health problems, health issues, behavior problems, lack of sleep, which I think is stressed when you have infants, but my experience has been that that does not stop at infancy. Somebody's always got some sleep issue, or you're up too late and you're not getting enough sleep. And we're going to talk about sleep specifically and how it really, really impacts our mood pretty quickly. So basically, we need to focus on resilience due to the constantly changing nature of parenting. So whether it's, you know, juggling between ages of kids, whether it's juggling transitions between environments that gets tricky, transitions during the year. I know for me, summer looks very different than the school year, and so those transitions can get tricky. And then, I think somebody mentioned this, but the idea of what maybe worked for one kid might not work for the other. And those of you who know my girls, they're incredibly different in a lot of ways. And I thought, oh, this first one, okay, we got it. We figured out how to communicate. We figured out how to reinforce behaviors. And then the second one comes along and it's like, well, forget all that. You know, out the window. And it can be really discouraging to feel like we've put so much work into this, we thought we figured it out, and things change, right? But that's what the resilience will help with, is getting through those moments of transition that are even, they're primed to be more vulnerable times of stress. So Charlotte? No. Oh. All right, so the idea of happiness versus resilience is an important one to differentiate. So the goal is not necessarily with resilience to feel better. That's unrealistic, it's unattainable, that's not the end goal. When my clients come to see me, a lot of times they are in pretty significant distress, and I will talk to them about our goal of getting them to feel better. Yes, I want you to feel less anxious. I want you to feel like you have more support in your life. That is definitely a goal. But my overarching goal for all of my clients is to not just get them to feel better, but to get better at feeling. And what I mean by that is that I want them to feel they have the skills to deal with any emotions that come up, right? The negative emotions, we kind of categorize them, the anger, the guilt, the shame, the sadness, all of those feelings that I think we've been socialized to be really afraid of. They're going to happen. They're going to happen to us. They're going to happen to our kids. And the more we know how to deal with them and the quicker we can recognize when they're happening, the better off we're going to be at handling those feelings and then not being afraid of them coming up. So that's the goal with resilience, is really just being able to identify those changes in our emotions quickly and then put those kind of systems into place that helps us get through those moments more quickly. Basically, when we think about anxiety, it's sort of the intolerance of discomfort, and that goes along with this idea of resilience. If we can tolerate discomfort and we can teach our kids to tolerate moments of discomfort, we're not going to experience those high spikes in anxiety that come when we feel like we're incapable of doing that. Does that make sense? Okay. So resilience as a goal teaches kids that those moments of struggle and discomfort are unavoidable, but we have the tools, and they're going to see us using tools to deal with those moments. So again, the goal is not to necessarily prevent these moments, but to prepare for them. And the good news is that means you guys don't have to fix everything for your kids. You don't have to fix everything for yourselves. I know with younger kids, I hear a lot that comes home at the end of the day, and they're saying things like, I got left out on the playground, and I felt so bad when so-and-so said this thing to me. And I think we're really quick to jump in and try to fix that and say, did you tell a teacher? Did you say something that maybe made them not want to play with you? Why don't you go play with a different group of friends? There is a time for that problem solving, and that's all really great, but in that moment, I think we can let them struggle a little bit and just validate that emotion. All we need to say is, that sounds so hard. I know that must be hard to feel left out. I remember feeling that way when I was your age, and I can remember how hard that is. That validation goes a long way with these kids of any age, right? I mean, I think teenagers especially are kind of craving this validation, and they don't want the problem solving. They know how to fix everything at that point, right? So if you jump in immediately with problem solving, this helps for significant others too. This is often what I see in couple therapy. We're so quick to jump in and just try to fix and problem solve, and what that person is wanting is just to be listened to and some validation. So start there. Take some pressure off of you of feeling like you've got to problem solve in that moment, and then you can kind of revisit the problem solving later. You guys can talk about maybe what works, you can talk to a teacher if need be, you can talk about some skills, but really, really focus on not pulling them out of that immediately, because what that's teaching them is that this is a feeling that's not okay. And it's okay because it makes sense. People feel bad when they get left out. That feeling is okay.
Can I add something just real quick?
Yes, of course.
So the analogy I was using, if Charlotte threw up all over me as I'm holding her, I would not lecture her on throwing up on me, right? I would not say, no, this, I would clean myself off, and I would continue to love and support her. And so when kids come home and they're feeling all this stuff that happened, they need to vomit on you. And you just need to take it, right? Now, if you do see a pattern of things, reach out to the teacher. If there's something that's like, this has come up again. But just to reiterate, let them get it out because they need to put it somewhere, validate it. Gosh, that must have been really hard. What did you do? Because what you guys are really good at is solving problems. We're trying to teach your children how to do that same thing appropriately at the right age level. But that's what we're trying to help create before they graduate here.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Good analogy.
Fun holding them.
So one of the key components of resilience, in building resilience, is this idea that we can reframe our thoughts and expectations. And so this is all coming out of the cognitive behavior model therapy, which is a really popular model, really empirically validated for treating a number of different things. But at its simplest, kind of foundation, it's looking at how our thoughts affect our feelings, affect our behavior. So they all sort of are intertwined and impact one another. So if we have any kind of negative skew or irrational kind of thinking that's maybe more negative, it's going to have an effect on how we feel in that moment and then how we choose to behave, how we act. And so one of the things that we need to learn in order to have this resilience is reframing, because we all have these negative thoughts, these maybe irrational, fear-based thoughts. And so we have to be able to notice those and then stop to reframe them to get to not necessarily a more positive place. We don't need this kind of toxic positivity, but it's more about getting to a place where you can see that situation more realistically and more rationally rather than it being a feeling-based thought. Is that clear? I'll give you an example, kind of walk you through. These are some of the prompts I like to use. You can ask yourself in the moment to help with the reframing as you're getting used to it. A lot of these are so automatic, you don't even realize you're having the thought, you just feel the feeling. So part of this is helping you try to identify the thought first, because that's the part that's easier to manipulate, easier to control. So one example might be, you've gotten to that point, Brady, I think you mentioned this, where you've requested something so many times and you've ended up yelling, right? I don't think any parent loves yelling. I get there and it always immediately feels like, why did that happen, right? But we get there, right? So I've yelled, and I feel like I'm a bad parent, right? So that's my thought. I'm a bad parent. I shouldn't have yelled. So these are some of the prompts. Is there another way of looking at this? I might say, I was clearly at my max today. I have not taken enough time for myself. I hit a point, and I reacted in that moment. That's very fact-based, right? There's not a lot of feeling in there. There's no judgment about me as a parent. It's just observing what happened that led up to this point where I had this reaction. Am I basing my belief on facts or my feelings? So is it a fact that I'm a bad parent? No, I feel like a bad parent in this moment because I could have handled that situation better, right? But it's not factual just because I'm making that observation. A lot of parents yell. A lot of parents are still very, very solid parents. What evidence is there to back up this belief? I might think, okay, well, I don't often yell. When I do, I usually try to, go back and apologize to my kid. I actually do a lot to invest in my kid and care about them, and we have a really good connection. So that feels like I'm a good parent. You're just kind of walking yourself through the evidence to support your initial thought and then sort of this counter thought of maybe I'm not such a bad parent. And then this one I like a lot. This one's very helpful in getting some perspective in the moment where it feels like this thing is so significant and so huge. How much will this matter in an hour, in a day, a week, or a year? And so in that moment you might think, hey, right now this feels pretty awful. My kid just stormed away because they feel they were in trouble, they got yelled at, that feels awful. All right, in a day, how might I feel about this? Well, we probably will have had a chance to do some repair work. We will have had other interactions that make me feel good about my role as a parent. I can put more energy into connecting with them. That would make me feel good. In a year, this is a blip on the radar, right? This is not even going to register. So I think asking yourself those prompts helps you reframe and get out of that feeling that that thought is a fact. Because thoughts and feelings are not facts, and if we can challenge them pretty actively, we're able to actually change our emotional experience in that moment. Make sense? The other thing that I think is really helpful in reframing is thinking about how often we say should, and really working to reframe that. I think a lot of the time we say, I should be eating healthier, or I should be exercising 4 days a week. And what that's implying is a lot of pressure, a lot of shame and guilt when we don't get those things done. And so what I would suggest is just making a simple change. All you need to change is the should to I wish or I would like to, right? And so what that does is you kind of make a spin on it. I would like to eat healthier. Okay, that's something I could entertain, right? That's motivating. I would like to be able to carve out some more time for self-care, right? That's giving you permission and motivation. It's stripping away all those feelings of shame and guilt and things that come with the I should. All right, so we say that a lot. You'll probably be surprised if you try to pay attention to it, how often we say it. This has always stuck with me. One of my mentors in graduate school would always tell us, stop shitting all over yourself. Remember that? And hopefully that will kind of help you catch it. It's just a really loaded word that I think we can shift, and it really kind of takes on a whole new meaning. All right, so we're going to talk about self-care. This is probably a concept all of you are familiar with. Again, this is something that I feel like I was great at before kids. Great. So much time, so much energy, and then you have kids, and it's almost like expected that that stuff stops, and I'm here to very much encourage you to find a place for that in your lives on a regular basis, because it's kind of like this oxygen mask mentality. You put your oxygen mask on first before you help anybody else. You can't pour from an empty glass. All these analogies, right, kind of represent us and needing to be full in order to nurture those people around us. I like this graphic because, if you guys can see it, it really kind of talks about how self-care strategies may differ depending on what your feeling is. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you might need to take a step back. You might need to drop one of your kids' activities. You might need to ask for a babysitter to come and help you out one afternoon. You might need to ask your partner to take over some of the things that normally you handle, right? So that might be your strategy in that moment. But if you're feeling alone, for example, you might notice that you need more social connection. So you're reaching out, you're trying to schedule lunch with a friend, you're trying to make a phone call to connect with somebody. You might be trying to make some new friends, right? So the strategy is going to be different depending on what your actual feeling is. When we think about self-care, it's really just a proactive way of managing stress. So think about it like you take a multivitamin, right, to prevent the impact of, illness, right? It builds your immune system. Self-care is doing that in a very proactive way, building your resilience. So if you are regularly engaging in self-care and taking care of yourself, you will be able to tolerate those situations more easily. You'll be more patient, you'll be calmer, you'll be more present. So it feels initially like a sacrifice. I think a lot of parents struggle with this idea that I'm taking time away from my family, my significant other, my job, whatever that may be, to engage in self-care, and I promise you it will be a worthwhile investment. Sometimes it requires multitasking. So, self-care for me, it's like I have to walk the dog every morning. Generally, I do that for 30 minutes. But I'm also going to, I don't necessarily love doing that, especially when it's 30 degrees out, but I'll listen to a podcast, and I will enjoy that. I'll look forward to that part of it. I've just dropped the kids off, I go home and do that. So it becomes something that's associated with something that I enjoy, and that feels like self-care, right? So you have to get a little bit creative. We're going to talk about that in the next slide. But there's a lot of different ways you can take care of yourself. I would say the top 3, if you're going to focus on any, would be prioritizing sleep, social connections, and physical activity. These should be kind of no-brainers, but I would just like a brief survey of how many of you think you get enough sleep. Okay. All right, that's good. I would throw my hand up there too. I know for me, if my sleep goes, my mood is so vulnerable. Any of you who are friends of mine know that I'm asleep by like 9:30, 10 o'clock. I'm not texting. Like, I will not respond. I am so protective of that time. I probably could get more done if I stayed up later, but to me, it's not worth that sacrifice. So I have had to find other pockets of time to get that done. I know that's tricky because sometimes when we get our kids down, it's the only opportunity we've had to be by ourselves or to be with our partner. So that is tricky. But think about making it useful. So, if you watch a show with your partner and that's something you enjoy and that's a way to connect, great. If you, have been looking forward to reading this book, make time to read that book, even if you end up staying up a little bit later. But a lot of times I think people have the goal of doing things like that and end up laying in bed, scrolling social media, not feeling super connected, not feeling really fulfilled, staying up later. That's the part that I think we have some flexibility on. We might be able to cut down on that in an effort to prioritize sleep. Social connections are huge. We know there's so much research out there that shows us that isolated people, lonely people are really suffering mentally and emotionally, right? We need these social connections. I'm not from Tallahassee. It took a while for me to get connected. I think coming here was a huge part of that. I think a lot of times when we have young kids, we prioritize play dates, and that's great. I love play dates. But it is not meaningful adult conversation that's generally happening during those play dates. It's like, damage control. You're like trying to do 5 different things at once. So that is great. You can do that. That's a great way to socially connect as families. But I'm talking about social connection for you. So if that means, scheduling a dinner once a month with friends, if that means trying to schedule a time that you can connect with people maybe that don't even live here. If you are struggling with this in general, I would say, this is shameless plug as your next PA president, but come volunteer. Because I feel like I met so many more parents that way, not of, the same age as my kids, but just parents, and you're not around your kids in those moments when you're here setting up for gala, you're here setting up for an event. You're able to talk, you're able to understand what other families are going through, what they enjoy, and then you can kind of build off of those social relationships outside of school too. And just in terms of physical activity, this should also, kind of come as no surprise. We get a lot of dopamine through any physical activity, which is our feel-good neurotransmitter that we need in our brains to feel really good. This doesn't have to be rigorous exercise. This could be a minute walk, before bed. It could be doing some stretching. It could be playing with your kid, running around at the playground, right? It doesn't have to be showing up to the gym for an hour. Some way to move your body will help you sleep more. It's managing stress. It's doing all these really great things. You gotta find something that you like. A lot of people just don't like the gym, or they don't like feeling like they have to work out. So make it fun. Make it something that you can fit into your schedule. The last thing I just wanted to kind of mention on this was getting some distance. And I think this really means not becoming so involved in our kids' lives that we then feel like they're the barometer for our well-being or our self-worth. And I think that's really easy to do, especially with younger kids, because we're so involved in a lot of their lives. We hear about things, we're helping them make decisions. It's so easy, I think, to feel like their successes are our successes. And while that is true to some degree, I think what happens over time is that sometimes we neglect our own interests, our own relationships, our own hobbies and focuses outside of our kids. And this becomes particularly problematic. You know, hopefully our kids leave home at some point, and then what, right? Then this thing that you have really kind of turned to maybe for your sense of self or your hobbies or everything that has surrounded your kid, it's almost like when people retire and they kind of go into a tailspin sometimes because what they spent so much of their time and energy investing in is no longer there. And who are they without that thing? So I see a lot of parents kind of start that process when their kids are graduating and going to college. I would much rather you start that now and cultivate those relationships, cultivate those interests, figure out what parts of your identity bring you that confidence outside of parenting. All right, so talk about, so basically some, oh wait, I want to talk about guilt on the stage before you jump on. I didn't have a chance to add to this, but you mentioned guilt, Megan. I think that's so common. I hear about mom, dad guilt. It doesn't matter if you're a working parent, a stay-at-home parent, a single parent, a divorced parent. I think to some extent parents are just kind of primed to feel this feeling of guilt. And that's a tough one because, again, it feels like we never can get it right. You know, if we're there for one child, we're not for the other. If we're there for our friend, we're missing bedtime because we went out to their dinner. You know, it's inevitable, right? We can kind of put it anywhere we want it. And one strategy I found to be useful in managing guilt is instead of, you know, thinking about what we are feeling guilty about, you might say something like, I made the decision to go to dinner for my friend's birthday, and that was important to me because they are important to me and I wanted to feel a connection with them and show them that. I did miss bedtime, and my partner is fine doing that, or my sitter is fine doing that. I made the decision to do this because. So if you have that guilty feeling, I want you to just think about replacing that or kind of challenging that thought with, I made the decision to X because. And it's a reminder of why you ended up making that decision and the importance of that in that moment. So just think about that in those moments of guilt, because I think it can kind of maybe shed some light on why this other thing you've chosen to do is also very important. All right, so now we'll move on to just some stress management tools. You guys all, I'm sure, have stress management tools. Sometimes we don't use them as often as we should, but I wanted to give you just a list, and if you could take a few of these and implement them, again, your kids are going to start picking up on this, which is great. Kids are fascinated by adults. I'm sure you guys can remember growing up kind of just observing what your parents did or what other adults did. They're kind of these little adults in that way. They're really curious. So they will pick up on what you're doing, and they will be able to see how healthy adults are taking care of themselves, and that's really valuable. So I'm going to give you some suggestions of things to do with your kids when you're feeling stressed, because let's face it, that's probably the source and the trigger of a lot of your stress. You're in the moment, and so you've got to handle it with your kid right there. And then I'm going to talk about some things you can do just on your own. One of the things that I really love are just any kind of regressive, playful activity, things like coloring, puzzles, building with blocks, swinging on swings. Parents of older kids don't discount coloring. My college kids love this more than anybody else. I think because it felt so regressive, it reminded them of a time when they were really kind of calm and, you know, things were easy. So even adults and college kids, older high school kids will really like that. And it might be something like this. You're in the moment, you're feeling overwhelmed, and you're saying, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. You know what, I'm going to go color for a little bit and just kind of let my brain key down. Do you want to come with me? And then you just go over to the table, you pull it out, and you start coloring. And they may join you, they may not, but what you're modeling in that moment is a way that you can calm your body down. And those activities, they're pretty mindless. You know, it gives you something to do with your hands, a lot of these things. And so what that's doing is kind of giving you that release of energy while your brain is having a chance to calm down. Taking a deep breath in response to your child's big emotions. If things are getting heated with them right in that moment, that inevitably will help you. It's the quickest way to slow down that central nervous system response. And what you're also doing is, if anybody is in your periphery, in your proximity, they will feel that change in your physiological reaction. And even if they haven't taken the deep breath, they will notice that, and that will kind of key them down a little bit too. On the flip side, if you're escalating, if things are getting heated, what do you think is happening to their physiology? right? It's rising too. So just think about that. It is 2 or 3 deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. It feels so basic, but it's one of the most powerful, kind of the quickest strategies we can use for ourselves and for them. I like this idea of a calm corner. I feel like when I toured Holy Comforter, I remember there being something similar in some of the classrooms where kids could go if they needed to just chill and regroup. One of my friends started this in her house, and I think it was just like a corner with some pillows, some stuffed animals for her little kids. And they could go there, right? These kids could go there if they ever needed to just take a minute. And what I really loved is that my friend started putting herself in the calm corner. She would go there when she needed a minute. It was not just for her kids. And I loved it because it truly signified to them, this is a tool for you. This is how you use it. Don't bother me for a couple minutes. And she was able to get that time. So I love that. It's so easy to do. I mean, just throw a couple pillows in the corner. You represent that for their kid, for your kids, what that is, and then you can utilize it too. This last one I really like. This was something that I kind of came across in the last 6 months or year maybe, this idea of setting boundaries with compassion. And so often as parents we have to say no. We have to say no to a lot of things. And it's almost never well received. You know, there's always generally some disappointment, some pushback from our kids that leads to this power struggle a little bit. So something I really like that I have tried that has worked really well is this idea of setting a boundary, but then immediately trying to align with your kid and offering them some support in that discomfort, right? So this process, it might look something like this. Your kid comes home and they're saying, I don't want to do my project. I don't want to do it. I can't focus. I don't want to do my school project. Okay, it's due tomorrow. You need to do your school project. I hear you. You need to do your school project, but what can I do to help you? What can I do to make it easier? Can I sit next to you while you work on it? Can I get you a glass of something cold to drink? Can I get you a snack to eat while you work on it, right? So immediately that power struggle has shifted because they're wanting to get control in that situation they don't have control over. You've given them some control in that moment, right? By offering them some suggestions of things that might help. You're also offering them comfort and you're aligning with them. So no longer are you necessarily the bad guy who has to put this boundary in place, but they're able to get this other side of you that can be really, really helpful in moving through that moment of, you know, having to say no.
And let me just add to that.
Yes.
So if there is, I'm just going to use the scenario that you were just presenting the project. You can say, you know what, okay, why don't we just take the things out, put it on the table, and then we'll come back. Making that first step for kids and adults sometimes is the hardest, but if they just physically put it on the table, then they walk away, then they're able to come back and go, okay, you've already taken the first step. And so that obstacle is now shifted behind you.
I like that a lot too. Yeah, it's about kind of not being so definitive. You have to do this right now. We don't have time. Your anxiety takes over in that moment. We don't have time for you to dilly-dally. We've got to get this done. This is due tomorrow. You've slacked off. You know, like so much of this can be our escalation of the situation. We need to take a step back. We need to offer them that support. We can offer them, entry point to get started. All of that will be really, really useful.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So with these management, techniques, I can see myself like pulling away, going to the color when I'm frustrated, or like taking a deep breath. How would you suggest wording it, especially for 4-year-olds? So I feel like my daughter knows like that Daniel Tiger's song about like taking deep breaths. And so I'll like try saying it to her when she's upset. She's like, stop it! So how do you or I'll say, I think you need to go outside to calm down. But to get them to do it, is there like wording that you would suggest? Because every time I suggest it, like say deep breath, it's like no.
I would almost try not wording it first.
Okay.
Observation. Like
Okay.
you modeling it first. And 4-year-olds are smart. They will pick up on it. They might not get it right away, but with time and with consistency, they'll start to be curious about what you're doing. They'll start to see a change in your emotion, right? So you might start there first. If you're kind of trying to articulate it and you're getting this, rejection or shutting down, then it might be time to just model it and maybe address it at another time when they've calmed down. Remember when I took that deep breath? This is like an hour later. That really helped me. Did you notice that? Like not in the moment address it, but at a later time when you've both calmed down.
Okay.
Maybe try that.
And then I'd also just add that when you're calm, I'm happy to talk to you. I am calm.
Yes. Yeah. We'll both decide when you're calm.
When we're both calm, then we will revisit.
All right, so then these are really just stress management tools for you. This kind of goes hand in hand with self-care. I would say self-care is on the proactive side. stress management tools are kind of on the reactive side. You've been reacting to something, you're feeling that stress, and you need some tools to help basically moderate that. Taking a shower or bath, that feels like a luxury sometimes as a parent, like an uninterrupted, like nobody coming in, nobody yelling, but making some space to do that. If that means you turn on a show for your kids, so it buys you 10 or 15 minutes, I'm all for that, right? Figure out something that will buy you that time. And then you can be really mindful about it. The idea of doing something mindfully, we get more out of that. So you might, get into the shower and you're like noticing how hot that water feels. You're noticing the smell of your favorite body wash. You're noticing what it feels like, just to be in a place of quiet and calm, right? Really being intentional about that 5 or 10 minutes that you have will make it more meaningful to you in the end. Moving your body. Again, going back to exercise, finding some way to move your body physically is a really great stress management tool. Listening to music or podcasts you enjoy. Again, this might go back to kind of multitasking. I would say loathe is a strong word. I really dislike making lunches. And so for me, what has helped is figuring out 2 days a week to do it. I'll double up and make 2 sets of lunches at once, and I'll listen to a podcast at the same time. So what became 5 to 10 minutes every night of stress is now 15 minutes twice a week of things that I'm enjoying while doing this task that I don't really enjoy. So somehow I've turned making lunches into self-care because that's the only time I listen to this one podcast, and I've carved that out, and so that's really, I look forward to that. Venting to a friend, there's a lot of usefulness in that. Sometimes you just get perspective, you get validation, you have this outlet, kind of like what we're talking, Peter, this word vomit, I just need to get it out. You can tell your friend, I don't need any solutions, I just need you to listen. I need you to listen and tell me that this is as bad as I feel like it is. And sometimes that commiserating can be actually really validating. Journaling is a really good one. There's a lot of really great research that kind of supports the idea of journaling as a form of stress management, as an outlet. There's really no right or wrong way to journal. You can get a journaling app, you can have a piece of paper, you can have it in your phone. But the idea is just getting those thoughts and feelings out. And sometimes they get so jumbled in our brains that we feel consumed by them. They're really disorganized, we're overwhelmed, and so getting them on paper or getting them out somehow is really helpful. One particular form of journaling that I love is gratitude journaling. And basically what this is kind of identifying 2 or 3 things at some point in your day that went well. This could be as simple as, you made it to school on time. Yay, everybody had the right shoes on. Great. Or we all sat down as a family to eat tonight. Great. Those things don't happen every day in my house. So anything like that you can kind of notice and write down will prime your brain to be on the lookout for those positives, those blessings, those gratitudes, and what it does is again help buffer against the things that inevitably do go wrong during the day. So you're priming your brain to do that. One caveat with journaling, if you are doing it, it helps to do it consistently just to get into the practice of it. But if you're doing it and you're starting to feel like it's a chore or you feel like, I don't want to do this again, take a break. It's not working for you in the way that it's supposed to. That can happen. It's normal when that happens. The idea is to make it new and creative. So maybe you take a break, maybe you change up the way you journal, maybe you come back to it, but don't force it. If it's not working, jump to another strategy, come back to it. Another big one that I think, I talk to all my college students about too, but really a lot of my adults, thinking about how technology makes us feel. A lot of us turn to technology as a stress management tool, and I think in fact it often increases our stress depending on what we're reading, what we're doing, who we're interacting with. So just think about it. I'm not anti-technology. I think I love social media. I love it for a lot of reasons, but I can tell when it makes me feel a certain way that's negative, and then I can tell when I'm feeling good about it. So just start to pay attention to that. And be strategic about how you use it. So there's a lot of really great things that you can do with technology. There's some really cool, like the Calm app, the Headspace app, are really great for kind of some mindfulness, relaxation exercises. They have sleep stories on there. You guys know what sleep stories are? Yeah, they're awesome, right? So if you're struggling with any of those things, find one of those apps, and if you are prone to go get your phone, try that first. Try that for 5 or 10 minutes, see how you're feeling, maybe you put it away at that point. But being strategic with our technology use would be a good place to start. You may not want to hear this one, but caffeine is a big one in terms of it's a stimulant, it's going to increase our feeling of stress. I say that to a lot of college students and while they're drinking their Celsius, and they're like, really? It's like they don't understand the connection between it being a stimulant and then increasing anxiety and stress. That's what it does, for better or for worse. So just knowing sort of the way your body reacts to caffeine, thinking about how it's maybe affecting sleep, which again is one of the things we need to buffer against stress. Just again, maybe reassessing how things are going, if you need to cut back, if you need to end it earlier in the day, thinking about that. And lastly, mindfulness and grounding exercises are really great. They're really practical, kind of in the moment activities you can do. I'm going to give you 2 examples. One I really love. I do this one all the time. I taught my oldest daughter to do this one. I use it a lot before bed. If I have these racing kind of thoughts at nighttime, of course you've laid down to go to sleep and everything comes, right? That you've put off, you've avoided all day, they all come into your head. So this one I really love. Basically, someone tell me if you have a catchier name for this, but this is the only thing I've come up with. It's the A to Z grocery store technique. And so what you do is you start with the letter A in your head, and you name things that you can find at the grocery store going through the alphabet. So this is what it looks like in my head when I'm laying down at night. Right. Apples, bananas, cereal. Oh my gosh, did we turn in that field trip form? No. Oh my gosh. Okay, hold on. I was on D. Let me go back to D. So what it does is it gives you this grounding point when your brain will inevitably wander, right? These intrusive thoughts will come, these racing thoughts will come. Your goal is to just get back on track and think about that next letter. And generally, rarely do you get all the way to the end of the alphabet. I sometimes will notice when I fell asleep because I'll be like, oh, M, that was my last letter. I fell asleep with M. I do this with my daughter, and I've taught her to do animals or kids' names. You can kind of think of anything, but it's to get your brain to focus on something else that's very unemotional, and it gives your body a chance to relax. So what's happening when we have these racing thoughts at bedtime, our body's activated. It's really in like this fight or flight kind of stress response place, and our body can't relax to go to sleep in that moment. So we have to shift our thinking to something else that's unemotional to give our body that chance to relax. So that's what you're doing in that moment. Any questions about that? It's a really easy one. You don't have to do it right before sleep, but yeah.
So my son sometimes asks me, what should I think about when he goes to sleep?
Yeah.
So if I told him animals, and tomorrow he asks me the same thing, and I say do animals again.
Resources on it, some really great books. The first one, Happier, is one I found in graduate school. A lot of it is about, I would say, geared towards like perfectionism and kind of the anxiety that comes with feeling like we can't fail. But it's just a generally really, really great book that even most of my clients that I recommend to read it, really love it. Good Inside Parenting is more parenting focused. If you guys have not heard of Dr. Becky Kennedy, she's wonderful. She's a lot of very resilience-based tools on how to navigate all these different situations with your kids. She has a podcast. She has this book is her main book. It's great. And she has a really good Instagram following. So even if you just kind of check in with that periodically, you get some very practical strategies to work with your kids. The 5 Love Languages of Children, you guys might be familiar with this. Dr. Gary Chapman, he kind of started this with couples research and love languages, but he has this book about love languages of children, which is really cool. Basically, the idea is how to make sure that you're communicating your love in a way that your kids can receive it, because all kids are different. Blessings of a Skin Knee by Dr. Wendy Mogul. She's another person who, if you can find a podcast or book or anything by her, she's really got this idea of kids to be self-sufficient. We need to back off as parents. We need to give them the tools, but then sort of let them have the freedom to make mistakes and mess up. And your friends. I have gotten so much value from talking about a situation with a friend, them maybe giving me a new perspective, them offering a tip, or them just saying, yeah, it'll pass, don't worry, just the validation. And then lastly, psychologytoday.com is just a website. If you feel like what you're dealing with or what your child is dealing with rises to the level where you could, it could be helpful to meet with a professional, that's the best website to go to. I'm obviously always happy to talk with people about trying to find referrals for counselors in town, but that's when you can sort by all kinds of criteria and hopefully find somebody that would be a good fit. The benefit of doing that at the start of seeing some type of issue arise is that it becomes much more manageable. So I think it's become a lot more encouraged and supported, this idea of therapy. And I just obviously think it's a great tool because when you want them as teenagers, they'll already be used to it. They're already they're like, know who this person is. And even if it's like a drop-in, once every 6 months or a year just to deal with this particular issue, they kind of see this person as an ally and a resource rather than something they're being forced to do. But like I said, so no, we kind of went a little bit over, but thank you guys.
This is the last time we're providing coffee for you guys. And one of in our strategic plan, we're doing this for our faculty and staff. Because when we take care of ourselves, we can be our best selves. We know that there are stressors when we leave here, but it is this push. This is where we can, and it's important. It's not selfish. It's so that we can be better in our other roles that we're obviously taking on. So thank you, Randy, for all the information. This is recorded, and we're going to be sending this out. But thank you all for coming. Have a great weekend.
So a lot of times whenever we see applicants, like right away, like, oh, we don't have to